Today's webinar provides an opportunity for you to learn more about the transition to one CGIAR, to interact with 3 of the co-chairs of the Transition Consultation Forum, or TCF, and to ask questions. Without much further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to the speakers for tonight's session. First, we have Marco Ferroni, who's the chair of the CGIAR System Management Board. Next, we have Nicole Birrell, who's the chair of the CIMIT Board of Trustees and convener of the CGIAR Center Board Chairs. And finally, we have Tony Cavalieri, who's a member of the CGIARSystem Council, representing the Bill and Melinda Gates. Welcome to our speakers.
Thank you very much, Shiku, and a warm welcome to everyone on this call. We have 350 participants, which is very sizable, and I'm really pleased for us TCF co-chairs to be able to be on this call and enter into a dialogue with you. Just looking at the poll, you're giving a similar response as other polls with the same questions that we have asked on other installments of this very same webinar series, which means that the majority are saying that you have a basic understanding of one CGIAR. And what that tells me is that, yes, that's good news, but it also tells me that, that we want to have this dialogue with you so that you can increase and improve further over time, now and over time, your understanding of what one CGIAR is all about. So and I think that this is what we're going to be talking about in the following hour. What is one CGIAR and why do we need it? What does it mean for ourselves and for our partners? And what are some of the next steps as we now shift from the phase of design of one CGIAR as a new institutional proposition to the actual implementation? I should also like to say that, as Shiku has perhaps already suggested, we have received very good questions from many of you in advance of this call. We will address a segment of them that have been the most frequently asked, and to the extent that there is time left in the 1 hour overall time budget that we have, we will be of course entertaining live questions from all of you participants as they come in, again probably on a selective basis, but all of them will be collated and answered in writing or in some other form that we may find and agree to follow up on. Therefore, colleagues, firstly, what is and what do we mean by one CGIAR? And we have a slide here that you can read, obviously, but basically, in my own words, this is one CGIAR refers to a more integrated and less fragmented CGIAR, a more united, and for that reason, as we are going to argue on this call, more impactful CGIAR. That is what we're talking about. One CGIAR, again, is the product of work that was done last year in the context of what used to be called last year the CGIAR's System Reference Group, which is a system reference group, an internal working group that was called to life by our System Council. The System Council is the entity that brings together our funders and is therefore one of 2 governance pillars of our system, the funders on the one hand and the System Management Board. And the System Council has approved unanimously the recommendations that make up one CGIAR, which I'm going to tell you now what they are, specifically what the 5 elements are that make up one CGIAR. So first, we're talking about a unified one mission for the system as a whole. And this is about a sharper mission statement of ending hunger by 2030 through science and innovation to transform food, land, and water systems in a climate crisis. We are having, that have been proposed, and this has already been part of, again, the System Reference Group's work, and it has been part of that which the System Council approved, the proposal of working towards, working for and with and in 5 particular impact areas, and they are as follows: nutrition, poverty, gender, climate, and environment. The second element of one CGIAR is unified governance. Unified governance governance would consist of a one CGIAR common board that will provide from the 1st of October, which is the profit date from which it will take effect, provide for a coherent strategic direction and oversight of CGIAR centers, alliances, and also the system organization. That is the unified governance element of one CGIAR. The third element of one CGIAR has everything to do with institutional integration. And there are three sub-aspects that pertain to this. First, the creation of an integrated operational structure led by a executive management team. And it is the task of that executive management team to provide coordinated leadership and to propose an integrated operational structure, as the title, as the words that are being projected actually insinuate. Secondly, it is about common policies and services. Colleagues, we have way too many different policies, procedures, ways of doing business. We're missing standard operating procedures from which we could derive a lot of efficiency. The proposal here is that we will have a set of one CGIAR policies and shared services. And then thirdly, also the need to present ourselves and to operate and work inside of countries and at regional levels with greater coherence. And we're calling this aspect of one CGIAR as a desired unified presence at the country and regional levels. We're also talking fourthly about a new research modality. This is being worked on right now under the working group called TAG2, which is presenting and developing the research strategy going forward. The new research modality is one that promotes clear prioritization, integrative thinking, and co-creation with partners to deliver on the mission that I have specified and briefly outlined above. And then lastly, but certainly not least, this is about more and more pooled funding, with funders having endorsed the ambitious target of doubling of our overall funding by 2030 or before, and increasing the share of pooled money, pooled funding to much higher levels going forward. We have targets for this, to the effect of the 50% of pooled funding as part of the overall funding package by 2022, which is relatively soon, and 70% by 2024. We need more pooled funding so that we have more predictable funding, so that we can work together rather than having to spend too much time fundraising for small projects, essentially, which has become a syndrome, a pattern of necessary behavior in our system. We would like to move away from that and have that much more comfort in funding, which a kind of comfort that is not only comfort in terms of the higher predictability of what we have that we can plan with, but also comfort in terms of us being able to put together more bundled, bigger proposals, bigger research and innovation propositions that, for that reason, of course, would have a higher impact potential. Right. I think that's what I wanted to say. And I think, Shiku, exactly, you're doing exactly as I'm thinking. We have a second poll where you're invited to reply to these questions in terms of your particular interest with respect to anyone or subgroups of these elements that collectively conform one CGIAR. Perhaps we're waiting a short amount of time, Shiku, to hear what people are saying here.
Yes, sounds good, Marco. Thank you. And before jumping to the poll, I just want to remind everyone that you still have the option of submitting your questions using the Q&A function. So moving to this question, which one of the one CGIAR recommendations are you most interested in? We have one, a sharper mission statement and impact focus to 2030. The second is unified governance under a one CGIAR common board. Third is institutional integration, including stronger executive management, common policies and services, and an aligned country and regional presence. The fourth is a new research modality. The fifth is more and pooled funding. So similar to the other poll, you have, you can take 30 seconds and then the results will display on the screen. Over to you, Marco. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I don't know if are you proposing that we wait a few seconds for answers? Yeah, there they are. The answers are coming in. Of course, so there's an interest as there has to be, because these 5 points are both mutually and logically and practically interdependent. You could hardly go with just one or two or a subset of them without going for the others. But understandably, there is a lot of interest in the question of institutional integration and what that means. I think I'll defer to Nicole on some of these aspects, and of course also the topic of why we need one CGIAR. Nicole, please.
Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be here with you all in the Americas. We have about 409 participants at the moment. I think they're still trickling in, which is great to see this interest from all of you. This is the first of hopefully a series of these webinars where we can start really behaving like a one CGIAR and have staff and leaders from our centers, across centers, as opposed to one at a time to interact with. So as it says on the screen now, why do we need a one CGIAR? Well, we've had CGIAR, of course, for 50 years, and it's been an incredibly successful institution in terms of producing excellent science, in terms of having impact in various parts of the world. What we are now faced with, though, is a very new paradigm of challenges. We have increasing hunger still. We have not solved that problem. We have the additional problem of nutrition now, and good quality nutrition. We have the climate challenge, which is becoming more urgent every day. We have soil degradation. And more recently, of course, we also have the pandemic, which still has a little way to go. I think everybody suspects before it gets better. It's going to get a little bit worse still. So we have a vast panoply, and I didn't mention also the loss of biodiversity. So in the face of that, CGIAR is really needed more than ever. And what is needed is a totally new transformative way of looking at our problem and how we can best respond to it. And so if we have fewer institutional boundaries, that is fewer distinctions between the centers, and we are supported by a much more clearly articulated, unified mission and an execution of that mission. And we also have, importantly, empowered management that stretches across the centers, as well as a unified governance, which we'll talk about a bit in a few minutes. We think that this agreed destination will adapt CGIAR much better in a changing world, aiming to make it more relevant, more effective, and more impactful. And I'm quoting there from a message from the voting members of the System Council when they approved this vision in Chengdu at the end of last year. So I will hand back to Marco now to talk a little bit more about what this vision, these 5 elements mean, both for us and for our partners. Marco, back to you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. This is a question that has been on everyone's mind. It has certainly been on my mind, and it will continue to be on our minds as our situation evolves, because one CGIAR is not something that can be created overnight. It is a process of continuous institutional fine-tuning and alignment, and it has, as this slide shows, implications for people, for centers, for partners, and for funders. And I think, therefore, since, like I have implied, it is not possible to spell this out in the last minute detail, but it is very much possible to formulate a number of principles, and I think that they can be stated as follows. For you, CGIAR's people, you will work for a truly global organization, a renowned leader in agricultural research for development, with stronger collaboration across disciplines, research groups, and regions. For CGIAR's centers and the Alliance, One CGIAR is about bringing together assets, staff, partnerships, and knowledge, but configured differently than it is being configured now. There will be more cooperation across subsets of the system as we enter into implementation of the new research strategy, where we will have many different kinds of interventions from small to large, but the large, big lifts that we will be seeing in the new research strategy, and we'll be talking about this, are going to require cooperation across subsets of our system, and that will have implications for our centers and the Alliance. For our partners, One CGIAR will be more accessible and easier to work with. One CGIAR will, in many instances where this can be done and is appropriate to be done, provide partners with one-stop shop access to our global capabilities. And then from the funder's perspective, One CGIAR's new prioritized research modalities that we have referred to will give them clearer sight of what they're buying, clearer sight of what exactly it is that they are investing in. And they have been telling us for years that they need that in order to keep up, if not increase their funding. Clarity with respect to that which is being funded. And I think that I have high hopes that we can do this through the new approach to research, the new research modality. And there will be a quid pro quo here. There will be benefits in this for us, in the sense that we will be having more stable, more predictable, and by design of the whole exercise, more quantitatively speaking, money to work with. Ultimately, One CGIAR is motivated by the need for much bigger impact at scale, which calls for a different way for us to get organized and for us to work.
And actually, on this slide, I would love to invite Tony to add anything additional in regards to the funders.
Thank you, Chiku. I'd be happy to. I think everyone understands that from the earliest stages of this has been collaborative work to develop the recommendations and begin the implementation between the funders and the board chairs, the DGs, really everyone in the centers as well, to try to come up with the best recommendations. And we're really looking for a different level of impact. I think what's important is that our organizations that we represent, the funders organizations, are no longer content with just some sort of vague, it's good research, we're happy. They're really looking for impact on the ground. They're really looking for changes in the number of people in poverty, in agricultural productivity, in livestock health, in inclusive outcomes. And so in order to do that, I think that's really what's behind much of the interest in the changes that we're seeing now. So thank you.
Thank you, Marco and Tony. So over to Nicole now to guide us through the next steps and how people can get involved in the process.
Thank you, Chiku. Well, this happens to be a really important week on our journey to One CGIAR. So a couple of things are happening this week. Firstly, the System Management Board, which Marco chairs, is taking the decision on which 3 individuals it would like to select to form that inaugural executive management team. So as you all know, we don't currently have a management layer that sits across all the centers. These three, we're going to call them managing directors, are going to be that first team, and we should find out in the very near future who those three individuals will be, and then they will start functioning as a team across all the centers in a few weeks' time. That's the first decision. The other decision this week, coincidentally, is that the center boards are going to make a vote, which is due at the end of this week, to appoint the new or the reconstituted System Management Board. So these will be 8 individuals who will form that board from the 1st of September onwards. And those same individuals will then be appointed by each of the centers to also be on the center boards or the alliance boards, where we've moved to an alliance between centers. So that is going to be effective 1 October. And so once those two are in place, we really then have that structure that has been referred to earlier to start governing and managing in a much more unified way than we have done hitherto. Of course, the directors general will still be there, but they will work, it will be easier for them to work together more cooperatively and collaboratively across the centers and alliances. The third important event this week is that we are going to see the first draft of that 2030 research strategy that Marco referred to earlier, which is then going to be handed over in a way to the executive management team to then develop further in consultation with centers, with partners, with host governments, etc., over the next few months, so that by December of this year, we have a finalized version of that strategy to be presented by the SMB to the System Council for approval. And then we can move from there. And in fact, some of that is already happening in parallel, given the urgency of our challenges, to develop the first 3-year investment plan, which will be aligned with that strategy, and then the big projects that that we will move to execute starting from the 1st of January 2022. The executive management team will have a very big laundry list of things that we will expect them to start working on very quickly. One of those is to come up with proposals for how we can best rationalize the operational integrational structure of the centers. We don't yet know what that will look like, but in fact, there are quite a lot of things that we don't yet know, but we now feel that those building blocks are in place, and we will be able to communicate over the next few months many more new elements and more detailed elements to you. So at the bottom of the slide there, you see 3 links, which obviously you can't click on at the moment, but we will record this, or it is being recorded, this webinar, and there will be a link circulated not too long after today. We will include in that also these links, which are really important for staff at the centers and leadership indeed at the centers to now remain very much abreast of what is going on. So we have newsletters which are published fairly regularly by the co-chairs of the Transition Consultation Forum. I suspect in the future there will be newsletters from the executive management team. There is a new website called CGIAR.org. On that website very soon there will be a short video which from the 4 co-chairs, which articulates again for wide circulation some of the elements that we're discussing today. And there are more ways for each and every one of you to become involved, be it through a community of practice or one of the work streams that are currently already in place and of course will continue, or perhaps by talking to some of the many partners, particularly if you happen to be a researcher, or for example, if you happen to be involved with resource mobilization, there will be many, many opportunities for you to discuss CGIAR, to raise questions indeed, and they can continue to be channeled to the team in Montpellier or elsewhere. And we will endeavor to have the Q&A on this new website, cgiar.org, updated regularly so that people can go and find relevant information there. So a lot happening and a lot more to happen. We very much look forward to each and every one of you becoming involved. Marco, I'm handing back to you now for the next topic, which indeed is a list of pre-received questions and answers. I see that there are others being generated as we speak, which is great, but there were some that people submitted in advance, which the three of us are going to try and answer in the next half hour or so. Over to you, Marco.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Nicole, and very comprehensive. And I do want to just reiterate one of your last points, which is to point to the fact that there are significant resources informing us on CGIAR and the evolving process that are available on various internal websites that I think have been referred to in the previous slide and in what you just mentioned. Look, so this question is obviously a priority question. How will the transition impact my situation? Will there be job losses? And I want to make three very clear, I hope, points with respect to this point. First, CGIAR is not a cost-cutting exercise. The size of our workforce is not something CGIAR tries to address. To the contrary, my vision is for a bigger CGIAR going forward with the right amount of funding and the right kinds of strategies and modus operandi across our system that allows us to work with consequence and impactfully, and as a result of which we would have more scientific and professional staff than we now have, not less. The second point is the following. Our main asset are our people. And therefore, CGIAR is about how to best harness that main asset, how to best harness your skills, your productivity, your passion. It is true that we will seek to cut duplication, and it is also true that we will further, as already in the past, foster excellence. But I do not view our world as a zero-sum world. I view CGIAR, and I hope for a CGIAR that will allow our staff to progress and to grow, as well as develop their professional skills, their capabilities, their contribution, measurable contribution to the big picture output of the organization as a whole. And in the process, it is desired that you be able to realize yourselves. There's a third point that I wanted to make on this, which is in the near term, we have a very clear task. And in the very near term, very little, if anything, is going to change for most staff members. In the near term, we've got a job to do, which is about delivering our current programs. As we now shift to implementation, we want you to keep an eye increasingly also on what is happening in terms of CGIAR, and in particular, ask yourselves the question, how can I contribute constructively to make this a successful change process? I think over to you, Shiku. Current salary structure, is this for me to address? I think so. Right, will my current salary structure be affected? I'm reading from my paper here because I can't see the full slide. Based on CGIAR-wide HR policies. So the answer there is, in the short run, nothing will happen, like I just insinuated. However, it is a key objective of CGIAR to harmonize policies and services across the system.
salary structures across locations. CGIAR also attract best by staying and being and remaining relevant in different competitive scenarios. The process towards common policies and services will be led by the executive management team that we have referred to, and the team will be supported by dedicated specialists and experts from across the system, the current system, where we have staff that delivers on services and policies at the level of individual centers. They are experts with respect to what they're doing. They will be drawn in, their opinion matters, the communities of practice that they are part of will matter. The design of these shared policies and services will start towards the end of this year, and rollout will begin from about 1 year hence. In other words, from somewhere in the latter part of next year. At least that is my expectation, and you will of course be informed. I think this is what we can say in relation to the question that is asked here. And I think maybe over to Nicole for any further comments on this, or the next question.
I think the next question would be good, Marco. Thank you at this point. So the question is, does the transition have buy-in and commitment from the funders? Well, the System Council unanimously, and I'm going to go to Tony in a minute, but just to set the scene, the System Council unanimously endorsed these 5 sets of recommendations that we talked about at the beginning of the webinar back in Chengdu in November of last year. And in fact, no less a person than Bill Gates told us even earlier than that, I think about a year before, that in his opinion, the CGIAR was too small and that we should be a $2 billion organization. So the funders clearly do wish us to continue to do what we're doing, but they want us to do it in a more effective and impactful fashion. Some aspects of that relate to cost recovery. And for example, at the moment, that is a bit of a dog's breakfast. We have different ways, different agreements with different funders. And so one of the things we're working on, one of the many detailed aspects that we are working on in one of the work streams is around cost recovery and making that more unified and clearer so that we don't have to spend time worrying about that. The other aspect is to have more predictable funding and longer in terms of its future commitment. So at the moment, we still have a lot of annually rolling over or not, as the case may be, funding, which is a very difficult environment for us to work in. And it's very difficult to have a 10-year strategy and 3-year investment plans if the funding is uncertain. So the very big hope is that we will have much more predictable funding emerging from this process. We also have at the moment a lot of resource mobilization happening, but it's happening in the centers individually. There's not that much yet concerted and unified resource mobilization happening at a system level. So that is also an opportunity we have to very much leverage the excellent communication teams and finance teams that we have in the centers to again work much more closely together rather than perhaps competing against each other as we sometimes see. Tony, would you like to add some perspective on that from a funder's point of view?
Sure, happy to. I think, as I mentioned earlier, this process that led to 1CG was really initiated by the chair of the System Council in an attempt to do 2 things: to increase the impact that we're having in solving the problems that we we are working on, and really to look for ways to get the appropriate amount of funding into this kind of work, because, you know, as Nicole mentioned, we're really not, you know, at a scale that we need to be to solve the kinds of problems that we work on. And so in order to do that, I think the funders have been enthusiastic about that. And I want to just kind of make the point of the relationship between the big lift research agenda and the funding, and particularly the shared funding. The more compelling and focused and powerful those research big lifts are, the easier it's going to be for the funders to put money behind those programs and to really support the kind of work that needs to take place here. The issue is with many small projects is not that they're not good, it's that they don't necessarily add up to impact the program, that to have the impact that we want it to. So we're really looking for those things. We're ready to support not only through our own funds, but in advocating by our leadership of the organizations we work for at the highest levels for increased funding for CG, and for understanding how we might participate in other areas like climate change, where funding could be a priority in the future. So the funders are definitely behind this from a number of perspectives, and not only the ones that are asking you to do something, but that are asking ourselves to do something to make this more effective. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Marco. Sorry, Tony, rather. The next question is around the partners. We've mentioned them in passing before. We have, I think, literally thousands of them. They are incredibly important to the CGIAR. There is no way that the centers on our own can execute our mission and our strategy without all these partners. We have host governments, we have partner governments, we have universities, advanced research institutions. We also importantly have all sorts of farmer organizations, cooperatives, many different ways of delivering the output of our research. Now, these partners have been involved right from the start, just like the funders and the centers have been in developing this new vision. You will have heard last year about a thing called the System ReferenceGroup, which worked all of 2019 on putting together those recommendations that became the 5 pillars of what went to the System Council. Well, there were partner representatives in there. More importantly, this year, there has been a lot of communication already with partners, and this will continue to happen. There have been surveys, for example, quite in-depth surveys in the process of arriving at this draft research agenda or strategy that I mentioned earlier. They will continue to be very closely involved in discussions on how we build a new business model to deliver at, for example, country or regional level elements of this strategy. And again, there is a role for you, our very excellent staff to play in this, particularly if you are on the research side. You would be talking with partners every day, and that is certainly an opportunity for you to communicate with them about One CGIAR. It doesn't all have to happen by board chairs or by TCF chairs or by DGs. It can happen at every level and by each and every one of you. Importantly also, if you happen to be involved in resource mobilization, you will be talking potentially to a number of partners, old and new, because I think it's very important that we extend who we talk to and who we bring on board. There are potentially excellent partners among the private sector, among foundations, among multilateral organizations, even that we're not talking to today. So a lot of communication has already happened, but will continue to happen, and that's very much built into the structure that we have in place to deliver this program. If we can move to the next slide, please. So the operating model of One CGIAR, well, what will that look like? Well, this is one of the top items on the executive management team's list to try and develop that very much in the latter half of this current year. So this is about how are we going to work together as centers. The centers will remain as legal entities. They will continue to have a DG, but how do we, for example, if we wanted to talk to the government of Mexico, or we wanted to talk to the government of Nigeria or Tanzania or India, instead of all going as individual centers to talk to those governments, how can we better organize ourselves so that there is one approach at country or even sub-regional or regional level from the system, which doesn't mean to say that the centers will lose their identity. That is certainly not the case, but the idea is to work much more closely together. However, the details of that are not yet in place, and as I said, this is something that you will hear a lot more about in the next few months as the EMT starts working down the list of things that it has to address. Tony, I'm going to hand back to you now for the next question. Thank you. Not Tony, Marco. Well, in fact, either of them, because this is about research, which is yes, important to. Right. Obviously, well, to both of you, I think you might.
Thank you so much, together. Nicole. Research is the essence of right, el meollo, as they would say in Spanish, the essence of what we do. So I'm pleased to be to begin to answer this question, because which themes will be retained, will be onboarded, and which ones will be retired? Well, right now, the full scope of CGIAR's future research portfolio is not known and cannot be known for the reason that we have alluded to already, which is that the research strategy for One CGIAR, which is a research strategy to 2030, is in the process of being put together at the present time. It is being worked on by a multi-stakeholder group, also known as TAG2, as many of you know. And this stakeholder group, this multi-stakeholder group, TAG2, includes key funders and also, of course, center leadership. And they're now working to develop a high-level 2030 research strategy. I happen to know that the first draft of their strategy is out, and they are deliberating it. I think as even tomorrow there'll be a meeting of TAG2 that discusses the current draft of that of the strategy. The strategy will be grounded in the mission statement and in the 5 impact areas that we mentioned earlier. And in parallel, of course, the executive management team, once it is on board, will begin to elaborate a first 3-year rolling investment plan that will roll out the new research portfolio that will be responding to the strategy that I've just referred to. That investment plan will provide a lot more detail of what projects will be taken forward over the 2022/24 period. I think that's what we can say about this right now. Yeah, and then there is the question of what will happen to CRPs. And I think, as all of us know, the CRPs as we know them they still exist, but they will cease existing at the end of 2021. Exactly how we will transition from the CRPs to the new funding modality is not yet known, but it will be described in precisely the first installment of that particular investment plan, which, by the way, and I think I did not mention this before,
the first investment plan is also meant to be approved or submitted for approval to the System Council towards the end of this year for the scheduled end of year meeting of that System Council. I think that I would like, with your permission, Shiku, very briefly refer to something, a question that I believe I've seen in the Q&A section, which is sort of one segment of our chat section, which is where somebody seems to be asking whether we're going to be doing the same thing as we are already, as at the level of CGIAR, as we are already doing at our particular center at this time. And I think the answer is that in the very short run, you are going to be doing the work that you're currently engaged in. Every center has its competency, it has its mission and mandate, and it's going to be working on that. However, over time, as the new research strategy kicks in, the new research strategy is going to affect the composition of portfolios at the level of individual centers. I think that is what we can say there. And the new offer is going to be more explicitly than has been the case heretofore, a combination of what I call single and joint offers, where the single offer are things that centers, individual centers are doing at their level without necessarily cooperation from other parts of the system, and other efforts, and clearly the so-called big lifts in the research portfolio going forward will be in this line of business, will be done together by having subsystems, subsets rather of the system work together. This doesn't mean that every center is engaged in every single thing that we do. There will be order in this situation. The guiding principle to set out this order is, of course, the research strategy and the corresponding investment plans that funders, that specify the programs and projects of research that funders will actually fund.
Thank you. And Marco, since we're on that topic, actually, I'd like to bring in one of the questions, one of the related questions from the Q&A for you. So the question is, how will the research areas and funding be decided, and funding distribution be decided, and will it be inclusive?
Yes, well, again, this the guiding principle is going to be the research strategy, which is being crafted as a document and a set of concepts that will allow for choice. That will then lead to the investment plans where individual programs and projects are specified that groups of funders, sometimes a single funder may fund, and other times groups of funders may fund in some coordinated way that we can call pooled funding. At that stage, clearly, the individual centers that will contribute to the implementation of that research program will know, and because they will have been part of the process even from the beginning as the research strategy is being defined now, because like I said earlier, centers are associated with that process as they should be, and they will also be associated with the development of the investment plans. Now, one of the things that will be a little bit different going forward, I think, compared with the CRP world, is that the investment plans will be more courageous in terms of setting priorities. This is what we have agreed with the funders. It is basically, as I understand it, almost a condition for the funders to be contemplating increases in funding, because one of the elements that is sometimes subject to criticism with a view to the current portfolio of CRPs is that they are not necessarily sufficiently clear in terms of the priorities that they are setting, which then leads to the question where the funders are asking us, tell us what it is that we actually are funding. And that will be only one thing. It also leads to something else, which is the question of, are we deploying our resources in the best possible way to really create impact?
Thank you. You can move to the next question on this, which
Oh, COVID. Yeah, thank you, Shiku. COVID, look, the CG System Council, the SMB and the centers have all acted very quickly earlier this year when the bad news of COVID became known, to assess and to respond to the risks that are associated with the pandemic. And all of the above entities, System Council centers in the first place, and SMB have asked themselves about the implications, actual and potential, for the transition to one CGIAR. All of us, I think, have recognized at first the overriding priority to protect the health, safety, and security of staff and partners, and also to protect business continuity where it could be protected, which I'm pleased and proud to be able to say that thanks to the center's immeasurable efforts, he has, with some disruption and some exceptions, essentially been able to be maintained. In this process, we have also discussed and sought to identify the appropriateness of continuing and indeed accelerating where possible the transition to one CGIAR. And I think that in general, everybody in our system understands that COVID, if anything, argues for more and a more rapid transition to one CGIAR than we might be able to get away with without COVID. COVID has taught us more than we ever wanted to know about the lack of sustainability of the world's food systems, if we think about where we think the virus came from. And so therefore, we need one CGIAR to make as rapidly as we can those game-changing at scale differences with respect to the food system that the problematic of COVID has thrown up.
Sounds good. Over to Nicole.
Thank you, Chiku. Yes, so the next question that people ask is, what will the brand of one CGIAR look like, and will the brand identity of my center change? This is a very important question, because how we portray ourselves to the world out there is incredibly vital to raising resources, but also to having an impact and to getting through to the powers that be in terms of policy setting, for example, in terms of achieving a much more systems type approach to the challenges that we are facing. So the short answer is that yes, we are going to engage, commencing a bit later in this year, in a brand review, because a lot of people in the street would have no idea what CGIAR means. Some of them think it's got something to do with tobacco, which is not a great idea. So we do need to address that. However, we also have the very important center brands, and you all know what elements your particular centers are famous for, and we don't want to lose that. So the challenge will be to create a new brand which will very much convey this systems approach and this new concerted, collaborative way of going about our business, but while still maintaining the very important expertise and knowledge that we have, and the impact indeed and influence that we have. And since many of the IFPRI staff are on this call, I would mention, going back to the previous question on the pandemic, that of course IFPRI has been vital in terms of policy responses to COVID, and they're the types of convening powers that we really don't want to lose in the new system. So an important question, and one on which you will hear more in the next few months.
Thanks, Nicole. I have one more question for you, but also just want to reiterate to all the participants that we thank you so much for all the submitted questions. In the interest of time, we'll only be able to address one additional one, but some have been covered also during the presentation. And for all the others, they will either make it into the new and revised FAQ sheet, and if not that, into different types of communication. So just to say that we really appreciate all the questions that have come in, and none will be lost. And so the final question to Nicole is, how will we reverse the trend of increasing admin costs and reduced research funding?
Good, very good question. Well, there certainly are opportunities for efficiencies as we move. much more closely together. We have 15 or sometimes 12 now of a lot of things in the system where that is really not needed in areas of IT policies, you know, payroll, finance systems. We are quite diverse, and there is a great opportunity there under one of the elements of revised institutional arrangements to really rationalize that and to make, frankly, for the staff, to make one CGIAR a much more efficient and effective and enjoyable, perhaps, place to work in, because at the moment we do seem to spend a lot of time on admin issues, and so that brings then costs with it. And indeed, the less money we can spend on admin, the more we can dedicate to research. So that will be one of the other priorities for the executive management team, to activate one of the strands of the reform, which we so far have not done a lot about, other than in the communities of practice that already exist in the centers, among finance executives, among HR executives, etc. But one of the things we're doing at the moment is a detailed exercise to try and understand where those costs are, so that we can try and address those inefficiencies. I'll hand back to you, Chiku. I think we have one final poll before we close this webinar.
Right,
Marco, yes.
With your permission and with Chiku's permission, could I just make a one statement, one sentence, or two? It was going to be 2-sentence statement answering some of the questions that I'm seeing here in the chat from IFPRI.
Yes.
With
yes.
the chair's permission, thank you. With the moderator's permission.
Go ahead.
Look, colleagues at IFPRI. IFPRI is about policy analysis. It is about development economics. It is about social science, nutrition, institutional development, trade policy, social protection, etc., etc. But the word policy is the overall defining theme here, which figures in the name of the institute. And what I can say about this is the following: we're going to raise the level of ambition inside of one CGIAR, and we are going to be working with a systems approach. In a systems approach, there's going to be much, much more need for coordinated policy analysis than has even been the case so far. We hope to get that funded, and I have the highest hopes for us to be able to really address issues both in a concerted way under a systems approach, both from a natural science perspective as well as from a social science and a policy analysis perspective that gets into the question of the incentives under which people behave, under which governments, the private sector and so on behave, that will then lead to outcomes which we need to shift in the direction of sustainability. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. I really want to thank all the speakers. I want to thank the 420 plus participants who've engaged with us, everyone who has submitted questions, all the interpreters and everyone who's been running in the background also to make the webinar success. Following on from this webinar, we'll share a short survey with all participants to inform future communication, including future webinars. And we'll also upload the videos of those webinars in the coming days. So please share with your colleagues who are not able to attend today. Thank you, and have a great evening and great morning.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day, and more to follow. Watch this space, as they say. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you very much.
Thanks. So long.